At our anniversary dinner last month, my husband excused himself to take a phone call. The moment he disappeared through the restaurant doors, an elderly woman I had never seen before slid into the seat across from me. She pressed a folded envelope into my hands and whispered words that still echo in my nightmares. "Leave through the kitchen. There is a taxi waiting on Birch Street. Do not go home. Your husband is not who you think he is." She paused, her eyes filling with tears. My daughter trusted a man just like him. She never made it to her 35th birthday. Before I could respond, she was gone, and everything I thought I knew about my life began to crumble. Hello and welcome to Twisted MNT Stories. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from today. Do not forget to subscribe and leave a like if you enjoy this story. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. But before that terrifying moment at the restaurant, my life had been beautiful. Almost too beautiful, looking back now. My name is Margaret Torres, but everyone calls me Maggie. I am 62 years old, a retired nurse who spent 35 years caring for patients at Denver General Hospital. My first husband, Thomas, passed away 4 years ago from a heart attack. We had been married for 31 years, and losing him felt like losing a piece of myself. Thomas left me our townhouse in the Cherry Creek neighborhood. It was not a mansion, but it was ours. We had raised our 2 children there, celebrated countless holidays, and built a lifetime of memories within those walls. After his death, I thought I would spend the rest of my days alone, surrounded by photographs and the quiet comfort of routine. Then I met Richard. He walked into the community arts center where I volunteer 3 days a week, teaching watercolor painting to seniors. He said he was looking for a gift for his mother, something original, something with soul. I helped him select a landscape painted by one of my students, and we ended up talking for over an hour. He was charming, attentive, and genuinely interested in everything I had to say. He was 58, recently retired from some kind of consulting business, and he had the kindest eyes I had ever seen. Our courtship was like something from a movie. He brought me wildflowers instead of roses because I had mentioned once that I found roses too predictable. He remembered every small detail about my life, my favorite coffee order, the name of my childhood dog, the song Thomas and I danced to at our wedding. He listened when I talked about Thomas without ever seeming jealous or uncomfortable. He made me feel seen in a way I had not felt in years. When he proposed after just 4 months, my children were hesitant. My daughter Emily said it was too fast. My son David asked if I had looked into his background, but I was 62 years old. I had spent my entire adult life being careful, being responsible, being practical. For once, I wanted to follow my heart. We married at the courthouse with just a few friends present. His mother, Patricia Caldwell, was there, an elegant woman in her late 70s with silver hair and a warm smile. She embraced me after the ceremony and told me she was grateful her son had finally found someone worthy of him. I believed every word. That was 6 weeks ago. The anniversary dinner was at the Summit Room, one of the finest restaurants in Denver. My husband had insisted on celebrating our 1-month anniversary there, which I found endearingly romantic. The crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead as we were escorted to a private table near the window. The mountains glowed pink in the sunset, and I remember thinking that this was what happiness felt like. We ordered champagne. We laughed about silly things, inside jokes that had already formed between us. He reached across the table and held my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "I am the luckiest man alive," he said. "Finding you at this stage of my life feels like a miracle." I squeezed his hand and smiled. "I feel the same way." Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and for just a moment, something flickered across his face. Annoyance? No, something colder. But it vanished so quickly I convinced myself I had imagined it. "Forgive me, darling," he said, standing up. "Business call. Some old clients who do not understand the concept of retirement. I will be back in 2 minutes." He kissed my forehead and walked toward the lobby. I watched him go, admiring how distinguished he looked in his navy suit, how confidently he moved through the room. I turned back to my champagne, feeling content. That was when I noticed the woman at the next table. She was alone, perhaps 75 years old, with a weathered face and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of unspeakable sorrow. She was not eating, just stirring a cup of tea and staring at me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. I gave her a polite smile, the kind strangers exchange in public places. She did not return it. Instead, she glanced toward the lobby where my husband had gone, then stood up with surprising speed for her age. In 3 quick steps, she was at my table, sliding into the chair my husband had just vacated. Up close, I could see her hands were trembling. "Listen to me carefully," she whispered, her voice urgent. "There is no time to explain everything, but you must trust me. Your husband is a predator. He marries women with property, and then he takes everything from them. Everything." I stared at her, too stunned to speak. Was this some kind of prank? A case of mistaken identity? She pressed the envelope into my hands. Inside, I could feel the thickness of cash. "This is enough for a taxi and a few nights somewhere safe. Leave through the kitchen. There is a back exit that leads to Birch Street. Do not go home. They have already begun the process." "I think you have the wrong person," I managed to say. "My husband would never—" My daughter said the same thing. Her voice cracked. Her name was Sarah. She was 34 years old, married to a man just like yours for barely 3 months. They said she slipped during a hiking trip, fell 200 feet down a canyon, tears spilled down her cheeks. I know she did not slip. I know because I found her journal. She was planning to leave him. She had discovered what he was. Before I could respond, she looked toward the lobby, and terror flooded her face. "He is coming back. Please, I am begging you. Leave now." She stood up and hurried toward the exit, leaving me frozen in my chair with an envelope of cash and a head full of impossible questions. I should have followed her. I know that now. But I sat there, paralyzed by confusion, telling myself that the poor woman was clearly disturbed, that this had nothing to do with me, that my husband was not capable of such things. Then I looked up and saw something that made my blood run cold. Standing near the bar were 2 men I had never seen before. They were both large, with shaved heads and dark jackets that looked completely out of place in this upscale restaurant, and they were staring directly at me. Not at the room, not at the other patrons. At me. One of them reached into his pocket and pulled out a phone. He said something into it while keeping his eyes locked on mine. The other one took a step in my direction. In that moment, every instinct I had developed over 35 years as a nurse, every gut feeling I had learned to trust in emergency situations, screamed at me to run. I grabbed my purse, shoved the envelope inside, and stood up so quickly I knocked over my champagne glass. The crash of crystal on marble seemed impossibly loud. Heads turned. The 2 men started moving toward me. I did not think. I ran. The kitchen. The woman had said to go through the kitchen. I spotted the swinging doors at the back of the restaurant and rushed toward them, dodging a waiter carrying a tray of desserts. I heard him curse as I pushed through the doors into the chaos of the kitchen. Chefs looked up in confusion as I barreled past stainless steel counters and sizzling pans. Someone shouted at me to stop, that customers were not allowed back here. I ignored them. I found the back door and shoved it open. Cold mountain air hit my face. I was in an alley behind the restaurant. I ran to the end and emerged onto Birch Street. A yellow taxi was idling at the curb. The driver, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, leaned over and opened the passenger door. "You, Margaret?" she asked. I stared at her. "How did you know my name?" "The old lady told me to wait for you. Said you might be running for your life." She gestured impatiently. "Get in. We need to move." I climbed into the back seat. The taxi pulled away just as I saw the 2 men emerge from the alley, looking in both directions. They spotted the cab, but we were already turning the corner. "Where to?" the driver asked. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Where could I go? Home was not safe. The woman had been clear about that. But why? What could my husband possibly have done? "I do not know," I whispered. "I do not know where to go." The driver nodded as if this was exactly what she expected. "The old lady gave me an address, said to take you there if you did not have anywhere else. You okay with that?" What choice did I have? "Yes. Please." We drove through the darkening streets of Denver, past neighborhoods I had known my whole life, and I felt like a stranger in my own city. My mind raced through everything that had happened, the woman's words about her daughter, the 2 men at the bar, my husband's face when he looked at his phone, that brief flash of something cold and calculating. Was it possible? Could the man I had married, The man who brought me wildflowers and remembered my childhood dog's name? Could he really be capable of something monstrous? The taxi stopped in front of a modest apartment building in the Aurora neighborhood. I paid the driver with some of the cash from the envelope and stepped out onto the sidewalk. Before driving away, the driver said, "Apartment 4B, she is waiting for you." The building was old but well maintained. I climbed the stairs to the 4th floor and knocked on the door marked 4B. It opened almost immediately. The woman from the restaurant stood in the doorway. She looked older now, more fragile, but there was relief in her eyes. "Thank God," she said. "You listened. Come inside, quickly." Her apartment was small but filled with warmth. Books lined every wall. On a shelf near the window, I noticed a collection of photographs featuring a young woman with bright eyes and an infectious smile. Sarah, I realized. Her daughter, the woman whose name was Dorothy Walsh, made tea and told me everything. My husband was not Richard Caldwell, retired consultant. He was a con artist who had been running this scheme for over a decade with his mother, Patricia Caldwell. The elderly woman I had thought so elegant, so warm, was actually a former county clerk. She had spent 20 years in that office before retiring, and during that time, she had learned exactly how property records worked, exactly how to forge documents, exactly how to make a theft look legal. Their operation was simple and brutal. My husband targeted vulnerable women, usually widows or divorcees with property. He charmed them, married them quickly, and then systematically took everything they owned. His mother handled the paperwork, creating fraudulent transfer documents, filing false liens, even fabricating court orders when necessary. He gets them to sign things, Dorothy explained, her voice heavy with grief. Just a few papers here and there. He tells them it is for insurance purposes or to add him to the utility accounts. But buried in those papers are power of attorney forms, property transfers, authorization to access bank accounts. By the time the victims realize what happened, they have legally signed away everything. I thought about the stack of papers my husband had brought home last week. Simple forms, he had said, just some administrative stuff for our new life together. I had been so happy, so trusting. I signed wherever he pointed without reading a single word. "Oh God," I breathed. "I signed them. He brought me papers and I signed them." Dorothy nodded sadly. "Then they have already started." But my daughter. She discovered what he was? Sarah found a ledger. Not on paper. A file on his mother's computer. She documented everything, every property, every victim, every falsified document. When Sarah found it, she finally understood what kind of family she had married into. Dorothy's voice broke. She was planning to go to the police. She told me she had copied the file onto a drive, that she was going to expose everything. 3 days later, she was dead. And the police called it an accident, a tragic hiking accident. She slipped on loose gravel. Dorothy's hands shook as she set down her teacup, but Sarah was an experienced hiker. She knew those trails better than anyone. She did not slip. They pushed her. The horror of what she was describing settled over me like a cold blanket. If what she said was true, then I had married a murderer. I had invited him into my home, into my bed, into my life. And now I was next on the list. "We need to go to the police," I said, standing up. "We need to tell them everything." "With what evidence?" Dorothy replied bitterly. "My word against the word of the former county clerk and her respectable son? They have already painted me as a grief-stricken old woman who cannot accept her daughter's death. They will do the same to you. Worse, they will say you are having a mental breakdown. Your husband is probably already telling everyone how unstable you have become." As if to confirm her words, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my daughter, Emily. "Mom," Richard called. "He is worried sick. He said you ran out of the restaurant and he cannot find you. He says you have been acting strange lately. Are you okay? Please call me." I stared at the screen. He was already laying the groundwork, already positioning himself as the concerned husband dealing with a wife who had suddenly lost her mind. "What do we do?" I asked Dorothy. "We find the file," she replied. "The evidence my daughter died trying to expose. It is still in that house. Patricia is too arrogant to believe anyone could find it." She keeps it because she needs it, to track her victims, to know which properties are still valuable, to plan her next moves. If we can get that file, we can prove everything. How do you know it is still there? Dorothy reached into her pocket and pulled out a small USB drive, because this is what Sarah copied. But the file was encrypted. I have spent 3 years trying to crack it, but I do not have the password. The original file is our only hope. If we can get into that computer, we can see everything. Names, dates, properties, maybe even evidence of what they did to Sarah. I took a deep breath. Breaking into someone's home to steal files from their computer. This was insane. I was a retired nurse, not a spy. But what choice did I have? If I went home, I would be walking into a trap. If I went to the police with no evidence, they would dismiss me as a confused old woman. And if I did nothing, I would end up like Sarah, another tragic accident waiting to happen. How do we get in? I asked. The plan was dangerous but straightforward. Dorothy knew the layout of Patricia Caldwell's house because Sarah had once lived there briefly after her wedding. She knew the security code, which had not been changed in years. She knew exactly which room held the computer. We waited until the next evening. Dorothy drove us to the house, a large colonial in the Hilltop neighborhood. It looked respectable, even beautiful, with its manicured lawn and elegant facade. It was hard to believe that inside those walls lived people who destroyed lives. Patricia was attending a charity gala that evening. Her son, my husband, would likely be with her, playing the role of the devoted family man. The house should be empty. We parked down the street and approached on foot. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. Dorothy punched in the security code at the back door, and to my relief, it worked. We were inside. The house was dark and silent. We moved quickly, using small flashlights to navigate. Dorothy led me upstairs to a room at the end of the hallway, Patricia's home office. Inside, everything was impeccable. Expensive furniture, leather-bound books, a large mahogany desk with a computer monitor sitting on top. Dorothy booted up the computer while I kept watch by the door. "It's password protected," she whispered. But Sarah mentioned that her mother-in-law used the same password for everything. Her wedding anniversary, the 8th of August 1971. She typed in the numbers. The screen flickered. We were in. Dorothy navigated through the files while I listened for any sound in the house. Minutes ticked by like hours. "Found it," Dorothy breathed. "Oh my God, it's all here." I came to look over her shoulder. On the screen was a spreadsheet with dozens of entries. Names, addresses, dates, property values, and in the final column, a status for each victim. Completed, in progress, pending. I found my own name near the bottom, Margaret Torres Caldwell, my townhouse address, status, in progress. But what made my blood freeze was the column labeled resolution. For most entries, it said things like relocated or settled, but for 6 of them, including Sarah Walsh, it said simply terminated. "They killed them," I whispered. "They killed 6 people." "Print everything," Dorothy said, her voice shaking. "We need hard copies." She started the printer, but before the first page could emerge, we heard the worst possible sound. The front door opening downstairs. "Mother, are you home?" It was my husband's voice. I came back early. The gala was a bore. We looked at each other in terror. Dorothy grabbed her phone and took rapid photographs of the screen. I stuffed the few printed pages into my purse. We had to get out. But as we moved toward the door, footsteps sounded on the stairs. Heavy, purposeful footsteps. And then my husband appeared in the doorway. He looked at me, then at Dorothy, then at the glowing computer screen. His expression shifted from surprise to cold fury. "I should have known," he said quietly. "The crazy old woman and my unstable wife, working together." He stepped into the room, blocking the only exit. "You have no idea what you've done." "We know exactly what we've done," I said, finding courage I did not know I possessed. "We found everything, every victim, every property, every person you murdered." He laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "Murdered? That is a strong word. Accidents happen, especially to people who ask too many questions." Dorothy stepped forward. "Like my daughter?" She asked too many questions? "Your daughter should have kept her mouth shut and enjoyed the lifestyle we provided." He pulled out his phone. "It does not matter now," In 10 minutes, my mother's security team will be here. They will find 2 mentally unstable women who broke into a respected citizen's home. Whatever fantasies you've constructed about files and evidence will sound exactly like what they are. The delusions of troubled minds. 10 minutes. We had 10 minutes. I looked at Dorothy, and something unspoken passed between us. She nodded, then did something I never expected. She lunged at my husband, throwing her entire weight against him. She was 75 years old and weighed barely 100 pounds, but the surprise of her attack sent him stumbling backward. "Run!" she screamed at me. "Take the photos! Get them to the police!" "Dorothy, no!" But she would not stop. She clawed at his face, kicked at his shins, fought with every ounce of strength in her frail body. My husband struggled to contain her without hurting himself. I hesitated for one agonizing second. Then I understood what she was doing. She was giving me time. Just like she had said, she was buying me the chance her daughter never got. I ran. Down the stairs. Out the back door. Into the night. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs screamed for mercy. I ran until I reached a main road and flagged down a passing car. The driver was a young woman named Carmen. When I begged her to take me to the nearest police station, she did not ask questions. She just drove. At the station, I demanded to speak to a detective. I showed them the photos on Dorothy's phone, which she had pressed into my hand before attacking my husband. I showed them the printed pages. I told them everything. At first, they were skeptical. This was exactly what my husband had predicted, a confused old woman telling wild stories about a respected family. But the evidence was undeniable. The spreadsheet with victim names, the properties that could be traced, the word terminated next to 6 entries. They brought in Patricia Caldwell for questioning that same night. She arrived with an expensive lawyer, looking outraged at the indignity of it all. But when detectives showed her the screenshots from her own computer, when they read off the names of the dead and asked her to explain the word terminated, her composure finally cracked. My husband was arrested the following morning. Dorothy had been taken to the hospital with minor injuries, but she was alive. She was alive, and she would finally see justice for her daughter. The investigation took months. Forensic accountants traced stolen properties worth over $12 million. Police exhumed the bodies of 2 victims and found evidence inconsistent with the accidental deaths originally reported. Witnesses came forward, other family members who had suspected something but never had proof. Patricia Caldwell was sentenced to 45 years in prison. At 78, she would die behind bars. My husband received 50 years with no possibility of parole. The judge called their scheme the most calculated and heartless exploitation of vulnerable people he had seen in his entire career. I got my townhouse back. The fraudulent transfer documents were invalidated. My bank accounts were restored. Every victim's family received compensation from the Caldwell estate. But the money meant nothing compared to what I truly recovered. I got my life back. I got my sense of self back. I got to stand in the courtroom and watch the people who tried to destroy me be led away in handcuffs. Dorothy and I still meet for tea every week. We have become something like family, bound together by the horror we survived and the justice we achieved. She keeps Sarah's photograph on her mantelpiece, right next to a newspaper clipping from the day of the sentencing. Her daughter's death was officially reclassified as a homicide. Sarah finally has peace. As for me, I returned to the art center. I still teach watercolor painting 3 days a week. My students know parts of my story now, and sometimes they ask me how I found the courage to keep fighting when everything seemed hopeless. I always tell them the same thing. Sometimes the people who smile the warmest are hiding the coldest hearts, and sometimes the only way to survive is to trust your instincts, even when the whole world tells you that you are wrong. I was 62 years old when I learned that lesson. I hope you never have to learn it the way I did. But if you ever find yourself in a situation where something feels wrong, where the person you love seems too perfect, where a stranger offers you a warning you do not want to believe, please remember my story. Trust that feeling. Ask questions. Read every document before you sign. And know that it is never too late to fight back. Thank you for listening to my story. If it moved you, please leave a like and subscribe to Twisted MNT Stories. Let me know in the comments what you would have done in my situation. And remember, hope always finds a way for those who refuse to give up.